Hello, it is time for another episode of the podcast of Still. And my very special guest today is Brad Ricca, the man that made this book happen. A book that I've talked about so many times before, Superboys, a beautiful and highly in depth story, a book about the two guys that made Superman my hero and so many other people's hero. They made it into existence. And Brad, I adore this book. And thank you for joining me today, sir.
Oh, Luke, thank you. It's really an honor to be on here. It's the pinnacle of super talk, and I don't say that lightly. So I really appreciate you having me on.
No pressure on me now, but there we go. But as I said, I've read this book many times. It's traveled with me. It came with me when I went to the Superman celebration back in 2018. And yes, we all know the story of Superman and the two guys that created it. But you made this book, and it is such a detailed look into this world that many people didn't know about. So we will get to that in a moment and that wonderful book, Superboys. But to begin with, sir, what was your origin story, as it were?
Oh, wow. I don't think anybody's ever asked me
Well, here
that
we go.
before. Well, it's a secret, Luke, and if I told you, it would endanger those around me. No, I think my origin story is really simple, but I think it's what I've found is that it's really a common one, even though it kind of doesn't feel like that when you're going through it. It's like everybody has everything traces back to your childhood, right? And no matter what you go through or what happens to you, or for some people, they find I don't know if solace is the right word, but I turned to comics as a kid. I loved comics, and I loved comics in the '80s when it wasn't like really cool to be a kid and like comics. And I know like the all the elders like me like kind of say that, and people go, "No, it couldn't have been that bad." Well, it totally was.
It
Like,
was, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I see now you go in libraries, it's like graphic novels, and if I would try and do that when I was a kid in my library, they would laugh at me. You had to hide your comics like in your Trapper Keeper, and so yeah, I always loved comics. I think for one of the same reasons that a lot of kids do, that it's kind of another world, just a step away. I mean, it's hugely different from ours, but in our minds it's like
Mm.
this could totally happen, right? Like if you uh came into a lot of money. I mean, I hate to bring up the other guy so early in the conversation, but if you came into a lot of money and trained with the monks, you could totally be Batman. I mean, of course you can't, but it's that when you're a kid, you really feel like this could be me,
Mm.
just a step away. And so it was comics that are my secret origin. That I loved books, like kind of regular books and movies and all that, but comics were the kind of the secret. That I didn't really know anybody else who liked comics. My brother read them and other people in the neighborhood, but back then it was a real, like, kind of, I think, more individualized
Yeah.
thing.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we all find our different ways into comics, whatever the way they find
Yeah.
us in life. For me, it was the TV show Smallville, and that
Oh,
sort of.
yeah, yeah.
I woke up one day and it was on TV, and I recognized the character, recognized the
Hmm.
stories, but from that TV show, I wanted to know more about the character when the series ended. So I got into Superman, and my love for Superman again came late into the game, but then
Yes.
through that came the comics because I wanted to know more. And then over the years, as I've grown as a Superman fan, I've wanted to know more about the
Yeah.
comics, more about the history, more about what makes my hero a hero. And that's what this book is a big part of doing. So I know you put a lot of hard work into this book. It's a whopper. It's a fantastic read. How did Superboys go from an idea to a reality?
Well, uh, yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? So I love comics. But the kind of weird thing is people always get kind of is I didn't really like Superman. Um, I hang on, Luke. I'll get back to it. It's I like the X-Men, right? So it's the 80s and the X-Men were cool.
Hmm.
Superman was kind of like your dad's superhero. And not that his stories weren't great in the early 80s, mid 80s, but I'm just saying. But I didn't really get into Superman. But to go back to the dad thing, so I live in Cleveland, and my dad sold windows. He had his own company in Cleveland, and he would drive like on the weekends. He would throw me and my brother in the back of the station wagon and drive around Cleveland. And Cleveland's kind of a weird city because it once was like this like starting up booming metropolis, like the third biggest city in America or something like that. But then it kind of hit a excuse me, hit a wall. And nowadays, well, it looks a little better now, but back then, especially, you'd go through and there'd be this like really cool Art Deco skyscraper, and then just like a lot of rubble. So it looked like Krypton. It looked like it was like this bombed out area. And my dad would always regale us with these tales of Cleveland because he knew the city in and out. And he said, "Did you know that Superman was created in Cleveland?" And I loved Superman from the movie, of course. The movie's the best ever. And and we would say, "You're crazy." We thought he was lying, literally, because here's Superman, the ultimate first superhero, the best.
Hmm.
Even though, I wasn't like the biggest fan, I acknowledged him
Yeah.
easily as the best. There's no way he came from this disaster of a city. And I can say that because I live here. I still live here. So it just started something ticking in my head, that not only just like you did with Smallville, like you kind of want to know more.
Mm.
Like everyone gets their Superman from a different start, but then there's so much history of different versions and different iterations that you just want to know more because it's such a good concept. And I wanted to know more, but I really wanted to know how, because it's such a strange. And as I got older, I started to think, well, what made them, it's the first superhero. And I'll argue that forever. People always say, well, it was the Lone Ranger. I'm like, it's not the Lone Ranger had a mask. That doesn't make him a superhero. But now I forgot what I was talking about. But it goes from I really wanted to know how they did it because I wanted to do it myself. Back then you want to write this stuff, you want
Mm.
to, and that just would not let me go. And it wasn't until decades later that I found myself in a spot where I think I can answer this question because to me, nobody had answered how they did it.
Mm.
Just that, oh, they created Jerry was tossing and turning one night, and there's Superman. And when you get older, you realize that's not where how great ideas are born, right? They take a long time and a lot of hard work, and I thought it was kind of condescending to be truthful about the idea of Superman. So that's what got me started.
And I like that, the fact that you didn't just want, as I said, it wasn't just a flash in the night, just an idea hit him. It was an
Yeah,
idea that had evolved over many years and many parts of his life that made this character a creation. And that's what you get from this book. You don't just sort of get chapter one. The night the idea came to them both. It's a steady read, and you get to join this journey with the boys, with their families, with their classic line of trials and tribulations. And you get that from this book. And as a Superman fan, it's one that I recommend to as many people as possible. And as I said,
thanks, Luke.
no, it's no. I'm going to be doing this a lot because I'm just
Okay,
so happy to speak with you. It's a fantastic, fantastic story. And yes, as a fan, like yourself, you wanted to learn more about this character, and it's not always easy. You can go onto a lot of websites and get some, untrustworthy information about certain aspects of these things that you like, but you put the hard work in by doing the research, doing the interviews, and they're from your home state, so there's definitely some hometown pride there involved as well. What was it like for you on this journey, going into this book, learning more about this character?
I was not definitely not prepared for it. I mean, I was prepared for it because I was older. I had this kind of background now as I knew how to do research, which I certainly didn't as a kid. Um, and I kind of knew where to start. But I just wasn't prepared. Excuse me, I wasn't prepared that I would find so much.
Mm,
Um, and I found pretty early on that there was definitely a big story here. That what other people had kind of, and I think part of that's a Cleveland thing, is people would tell the story, and it is a good story, that he tosses and turns at night, and then like the idea pops out of his head. Um, that's a good story, but it doesn't mean it's the truthful one. And I soon found out that there was so much more that we didn't know about both of the guys, and their families, and just Superman himself. And it staggered me and still does. Because somebody will come along and write another Superman book like this, and obviously I hope they do, because there's more out there. But what I was really surprised by is also what I'm really happy with, is that it turned out, and I would have never guessed this in a billion years, is that Superman, like you said, and I'm only saying this because you brought it up, is kind of like an autobiography. And when I started, I was like, oh, they wanted to create this, like everyone says, create this character to like fight the Great Depression and crush the Nazis. And I mean, that's all there, totally. But it comes out of both of them, making him like um a work of art, because that's art. They didn't do it. They did, they wanted to make money for sure, but they didn't do this. Someone didn't come to them like the other guy. Can we say Batman on
you
this?
you can, yeah.
Um, all right, okay, I like Batman too. Um, like Batman, where they say, okay, you guys make me something that's gonna sell,
Mm,
right? And make me something like Superman, basically, is what they say. And that's more, not that Batman's not a work of art, because he certainly turned out that way, but that's like a commercial enterprise.
yeah.
That's work for hire, right? And Superman, these the boys, Jerry and Joe, they came up with it on their own, and their whole lives are in that character, and that just blew me away.
It is. It's if you're going to write a character based on what you know and
Yeah.
sort of the vision of yourself that you see as your best, the best version of yourself, Superman's not a bad character to create. I mean, it says a lot about one's ego, but
Oh yeah.
that's the power that creation has, and the power of imagination of these two guys, which is what we
Hmm.
see in this book. You've mentioned that there's lots of information in this book, and there's some fantastic stories. Do you have any favorites that happen in this book?
Oh man, I should have. I don't know. There's a lot of them. There's one that's like really small. It's just like the smallest possible detail, but I think it's like super cool. So they're trying, like Joe, didn't go to art school, and all of a sudden he's drawing this action hero. So he's all self-taught, and he takes a couple classes here and there, but they're not like posing Superman poses. And it boggles my mind how he learns all that, and he learns it by reading newspaper comics and copying them and all this. But there's this great bit that another like real life Cleveland hero was Jesse Owens, who was this track star at Ohio State, and then he went to a bull track star, and went to the Olympics, and kind of won it all. And this is famously in Berlin, where he wins, and then kind of sticks it to Hitler. And so they're drawing Superman, who's supposedly gonna be the fastest man in the world. This is pre-Flash, and you can argue, as I'm sure you'll agree, Luke, that he is faster than the Flash. But
You know,
um,
it's a fan theory that everyone loves to talk about. But come on,
yeah.
it's Superman.
Um, but I found this picture of Jesse Owens ready, running on the track, and it matched up 100% with an early Joe picture of Superman. So he's modeling Superman after um, Jesse Owens, the best black athlete in the country. And I just love it because there's so much more to Superman than we think, because we see
Mm.
him now as this kind of giant corporate icon. You can't touch Superman, and you're going to get sued, right? And he's a white guy, and he's all, but there's so much more to him that just surprised me. For some reason, I just love that little detail.
And it's a good one where you can sort of see the link again, that red string theory on a corkboard of how all these
Yeah.
moments interact between the boys' lives and that moment as well. But again, there's lots of fun tidbits in that throughout the book. One of the ones that I love was the fact that both the boys had a crush on a young lady named Lois. I love
Oh
that.
yeah.
It's all things like that that sort of you learn when you read this book. Yes, we know so much about the character. We've read his stories over the years, but to get an insight into these two guys' lives, about how they came to be, how they had a friendship, how they had troubles in their friendship, and the business aspects of life as well. If a film could be made about that, this is the book that they're going to use this book. I'm absolutely sure of it. And
Hollywood, can you hear Luke?
yes, listen to me, the gods that are up there, because Superman's always going to be a talking point. As we said, he was really the first superhero. He's one of the biggest icons when it comes to pop culture. He's like Coca-Cola. We know who Superman is, and now another person has taken on the reins. We've got James Gunn now making his next Superman film, and it's always going to be a character that's talked about. And I love that in years to come, yes, you did so much research with this book, and you've done a fantastic job of mentioning all the research in the back. Your name will be in those books in the future when it
Oh,
comes to talking about
stop.
it. Will. I jest, but it will. Your name will be there as one of those people that has put in the footwork and made this book um, a reality. So thank you. I wanted to get that across in this podcast. I've already done it several times, but I'm so glad we finally got to speak about this book today. What was one of the hardest parts about this book for you?
Writing it.
Of course.
Because there was so much stuff, and I'd never written a book before. And every time I thought, well, I think I have enough, I would like go to the library and find more. Because there was just so much. And part of it, I was very lucky to be here, because there was like most of it was in Cleveland, and just people hadn't looked. And I don't blame them. It's one of those things, you don't like go look, you don't find it till you go looking for it. Um, but it took a long time. Like the publisher says, well, it sounds like it took 10 years. Can we put that on the book? It took 10 years of research. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but it wasn't like 10 straight years where I like came out at the end with like a beard, and it was like on and off. Like with real life going on at the same time. Um uh yeah, so it was, my dad was sick at the time when I was finishing it, so I kind of wanted to do that for him, because he like started the whole thing. But it was just, yeah, I guess your question, what's the hardest part? That was the hardest part. It was also hard to sometimes in the beginning realize that I had to, these two have been like kind of set up as like, I'm not saying this the right way. Sometimes they're portrayed as very naive, very innocent. Sometimes they're portrayed as kind of jerks trying to get more money. Sometimes they're portrayed as like the heroes. And I realized early on that there was so much new stuff that I had, I would have to like chip away at kind of all three of those, that they were not perfect human beings. They made mistakes. They weren't friends all the time. Everyone said they're best friends their whole life. No, they weren't, but who is, right? So I very quickly got beyond that and said, I'm just going to tell the truth. Um, and I left it all in there. And it's always like when you're dealing with a subject like this, you always are and this is my first book, but you're a little like, I don't want people to get mad. I don't want people to get angry. I don't want people to file a lawsuit. But at the end, I realized I can't worry about any of that stuff. I'm just going to tell the truth. And I'm so glad I did that because I never heard one. Um, even the stuff that doesn't portray them in the best light, I think it portrays them as human. I think people appreciate that, and I was just real grateful for that, response to it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly hearing the good and the bad sides about them brought me a closer connection to these two guys that created my hero.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Sadly, I'll never be able to sort of sit down and in a room and ask them questions about how they created them. But with this book, you do get, as you said, the truth. You get a massive insight into their world, and you talked about their naivety, that some people believe that. I think it was it $130 they
yeah,
sold them off for. And I mean, you think
yeah,
that's even sort of back decades ago, almost a century ago, that's so cheap. What were you
yeah.
thinking? But you get an insight into this book as to why, and the process afterwards, and why they wanted, not, as you said, just more money. It wasn't just the greed, it was the honor of being the people that created Superman.
Mhm.
And that's what I love to see now. Whenever there is a new film that comes out or a new animation, it says, we're using Superman thanks to the Jerry
Yeah,
Siegel and Joe Shuster family. So that's
yeah.
always that's a nice little nod that's always going to be seen. And I think James Gunn will more than likely do that in his Superman film. He's already been very open with his love for Superman and comics, and that's going to be an exciting thing that I'm ready for the future. But another aspect of Superman's life that you have had is that you've interviewed Mark Waid, one of the ultimate Superman writers, a guy that I look up to. I managed to speak with him a few years ago, and that's a wonderful
It was
interview that
cool.
is available. The link to that YouTube video will be in this podcast. What was that like, sitting down with Mark and talking about comics and Superman?
It was it was kind of tough because I've done this enough now, like talk to people and interview people, that I don't want to say it doesn't phase me, but you kind of realize that everyone's just a person, right? Even the famous people. Um, I interviewed last year. I interviewed Henry Winkler on
Wow.
stage, Fonz, and
Yeah.
I was like, and just like the nicest guy on the planet. And all these people are the same. They're
Mm.
just people like us. But Wade was, because like you, I'd grown up reading all of his stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, up there in the top whatever of Superman writers. And people like us, we always revere the writer, we're kind of like, oh, the Hollywood celebrity. Oh, he wrote Superman. Oh, he wrote Birthright. Yeah, Kingdom Come. So it was hard to come up with questions,
Mm.
because I wanted to do things that he's been interviewed a zillion times, that he hadn't heard, but at the same time, like, get to kind of questions that Superman, people want to know about. So it was great fun. He is amazing, and again, he's like you talked about. James Gunn, has this kind of, you can kind of feel the Superman love come from him. It's the same thing from Wade. I mean, you're dealing with a genuine, from Mark. I shouldn't call him Wade. From a real genuine place that us nerds can see,
We
we
get it.
can
Yeah,
sense it.
we can see it's not sort of a like a
It's not fake.
fake fan, as it were. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, this guy, as I say, they get it, and that's
Hmm.
again something else that I got from this book from you. Even though as you said, Superman isn't your number one superhero, you're from that hometown. You're from Cleveland. You're from Ohio. There's that connection to it, which I love. Have you been to that house in Ohio, the Superman house?
Many times.
Oh,
And just to be clear, Superman wasn't my favorite as a kid, but now after this, 100%.
there we go.
Yeah,
Now we're
because once I realized it's just like, yeah, I mean, there's nobody else. But yeah, no, I've been to the house many times. Again, my dad drove us by it, and I finally went in just when I was starting the project. I went there with my girlfriend, and we um at the time we got there, and I was like too nervous to go in. There was somebody on the front porch. I'm like, I can't do it. And she like shoves me out of the car, and she's like, "Hey, can we?" And Mrs. Gray, who lives there, let me in and took me up to the room. And it is, I think you should um, make the journey at some point, my friend, because it is.
it's my bucket. It's definitely on my bucket list. I'm getting goose pimples. The fact that you were in said room, the room
You
where it happened, as it were. But
Right. You
oh,
get a chill. You get a
oh,
sense because you're in the room where he thought about it, right?
mm,
And it makes you realize that all this like huge corporate um stuff, Superman comes just from a kid,
mm.
right? Really. And that's like the best part of the whole story that, dreams come true, and cue the dramatic soundtrack. But yeah, I hope because they're going to be in a beautiful bit of, I don't think irony at all. They're going to be, I think it's a testament to two things: tax breaks, and I think, I don't know him obviously, but to the respect for the character. They're filming parts of the new movie in Cleveland
They are.
in the summer, and I'm hoping that he'll go out and see the house. And I would like bet almost anything that they would.
I I
The
mean, it's
ground zero, yeah.
yeah. I mean that it's. I'm sure he's very aware of it. The
Oh
research
yeah.
that he's shown, and he's shared photographs of his office where there's some fantastic panels from some iconic Superman stories.
Mm.
He knows about
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, and again, he knows about Ohio. He knows about the history. So for him to choose this location for some of the filming, it's a beautiful tie-in, and that's
Oh
why
yeah.
I'm hoping in this film there will be some not only recognition of the hero. I mean, it was originally called Superman Legacy, so I think he will be hopefully shedding some light on on the place, on the house, on the boys, on the
Mm.
history of this. So yeah, if you get if you get an email from Mr. James Gunn saying, "Hey, I'm coming down. Do you want to hang out for 10 minutes?" I'll put,
Oh yeah, I'll see what I can do. I have three kids.
yeah, we'll bring him down. We'll be fine. We'll be fine.
No, I think it'll be great. I think whatever he does, I think he's like kind of shown that he's, like you said, one of the real ones. So I'm just happy to see what he comes up with. I think it'll be great.
And I mean, that's the thing. It's this isn't my first Superman movie rodeo, as it were.
Oh yeah,
I've
yeah,
seen actors come and go before. I've seen directors and stories not even
yeah,
make it onto the big screen, but
yeah,
we're still getting Superman stories. We're still getting
yeah, yeah,
people excited, and again, that's a testament to the character and a
yeah.
testament to the boys that after all these decades, people are still talking about that idea, about a simple idea that has jumped from their mind to the pages, to comics, to TV shows, to T-shirts, toys, and to this
Hmm.
book. It's something that I say a lot is it's the tapestry of Superman. There's so many
Ooh,
connections from one thing to the other, and
yeah.
you, sir, are you're a big part of that tapestry for me and many others. So again, another thank yous coming your way. I'm sorry, but they
No, that's
they
okay.
they continue to come your way. What's next for you, sir? What's going on in the world of Brad Ricca?
I'm No comic stuff. Well, maybe some comic stuff, but there's a I'm working on a book right now on Houdini, the
Oh,
magician.
nice.
And it's very painful, and but it's going along, so we'll see.
I mean, it's one of those characters of history that's always been a great story, a great sort of personality, and one of those characters that jump off the history pages. I think there's been a few Houdini films over the years,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah.
a book like this about the world of Houdini and learning how he, learned his trade, as it were, back before internet was a thing, before research was a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
How'd you go about learning to be an escapologist when there's no one to ask questions to? That's when you have to sort of travel around the world, much like Batman
Like
did,
Batman, yeah.
like when he learned his trade. So that I'm interested about. So that'd be a good one to
Ooh,
read.
that's cool. I never
Yeah.
thought about the Batman angle.
Oh, great. Now he's going to be back in another book. Ugh, what have I done? What have I done? But again, it's how we relate to real life sometimes.
Yes.
It's what would Batman do? What would Superman
Mhm.
do in this situation? How can I, be like my hero? So yeah, that's going to be something that I will definitely be looking out for. Um, this book, as I said, it means a lot to me. What was it like when you finally got a copy in your hands, a real life copy?
Oh man, it was yeah. It was because they didn't they didn't send me one. Um it was like this is my first book, and I guess whatever. So I knew it was coming out, obviously, and it was like supposed to come out like the next Tuesday. And I went to a like some kind of local like literary conference or whatever, and this local bookstore was there, and I know the owner of it, and she's like, "Oh hey Brad, we got your book." And she points up, and I was like, "Oh," it just like fell over and froze. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I still, to be tell the truth, I still don't believe it if I like see it and I'm like, really? Did that? It's really strange. Um, but it's cool. It's definitely, I think it's like anything, everyone kind of has their thing.
Mm.
Whether they'll like start a big project, right? Like you're tiling the bathroom, which is like impossible. I think I would just go crazy doing that. But if you do it, it takes forever. And then at the end, you like step back, and maybe it's not perfect, but only you can kind of see the imperfections. And at that point, who cares? Because it's done. There's nothing you can do. And you just feel like it's not even you feel good, but you just feel like I did that. And I sometimes think about like, well, I feel like this way about this book. Imagine how they felt about Superman,
Mm.
that they make this thing and it's all of a sudden it's everywhere, and then it's just like taken away. And then you realize, just like the height of it, but also like just the staggering depths of what that must have felt like.
But again, you put it beautifully. The fact, just a task like tiling the bathroom. There's a
Yeah.
beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And sometimes you can't see that finish line, that
Mm-mm.
last page, or that last tile, as it were. But it's there. And if you keep at it with determination and patience, you'll get there. And you did, sir. And you've got this book to prove it. And with some fantastic quotes on the back by another fantastic Superman person, Jeff Loeb,
Oh yeah.
who's part of my tapestry of Superman, as he was a fantastic co-creator of Smallville, and Stan Lee, of course, one of those infamous names in comics, who said the truly amazing biography of two of the most important names in popular fiction. It's a book no pop culture fan will want to miss, and that includes yours truly. As as a quote goes, it's not a bad one. I'm surprised you've not got that on a T-shirt today, Brad. But
Well, it's funny because they said, I mean, I again, I had no idea what I'm doing. I still don't have any idea what I'm doing, but they're like, we're gonna get Jeff Loeb, and I worship Jeff Loeb. I love, Smallville, um, Superman, a man for all seasons is as good as it gets. But he's just a tremendous comics writer, I think. And then they're like, we could try Stan Lee. I have a number, an email. They're like, and I knew from being a comics fan, the unwritten rules that Stan Lee blurbs like everything.
Mm.
Like if you'll throw it in front of him, but what I was surprised by are two things. They told me I mean, this was a while ago. This was 10 years ago, but he said, he does read it and he goes through it. He does his blurb. It's not an assistant. I don't know what happened later on, but that's a sad story. But yeah, and they're like, Stan Lee will blurb anything. But then they sent me back this, and I just like stared at it because I didn't care if he blurbed everyone. Is that he did? I just couldn't believe it because I grew up a Marvel zombie, and Stan Lee's he's the high priest. So and then obviously there's other stuff, but when you're a kid, it's Stan Lee.
Yeah.
So it's still crazy to me.
It's a fantastic quote to have on your book. And I mean, yes, you did a fantastic job with it. If you had a time machine and you were able to go back in time and speak with Jerry and Joe,
Ooh.
what would you like to speak with them about or ask them?
Nobody's ever asked me that.
Yes.
Because it's like I think of these books as imperfect time machines, right? Like the instant someone invents time travel, I am totally out of a job. Because then you can just go back and like record everything and there's your transcript and say, this is what happens. But until that point, and don't get me wrong, I love time travel, but they can hold off because I'm okay the way it is right now. It's kind of up to like people like me to like find all the data and build like the best possible vision of it. Is it true? I don't know, right? I can't say I don't have a time machine, but this is the best I could do. So the version of that question I get, notice I'm not answering it. The version I usually get is, and this was, I don't know, this question always throws me because they're like, if you go to the afterlife, which implies that I'm dead, which is not always like the best thing to ask your well, you're gonna die soon.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, if you go to the afterlife, what do you say to Jerry and Joe? And I thought about that, and I always kind of picture it that we're like sitting in like a couch or something. I don't know why I equate the afterlife with like a nice velvet couch, but why not? Right?
Comfortable. Yeah, no.
And we just like look at each other and go, and just like walk away. Cause I feel like I really know them like really well. I mean, do I? I have no idea. I mean, I did the best job I can. I mean, some people who did know them have come and said, you got this, right? Or I, asked them beforehand and some people have said like, no, this isn't right. But if I could go back in time and ask them one thing, oh, that's so hard. Only one thing? That's the hard part.
No, well, you can have a full-blown conversation. You can ask or talk
Who
about
would it
whatever
be?
you want to. Yeah.
But it has to be one person.
No, it could be anybody. Yeah, it could be Jerry, it could be Joe, it could be anybody through time.
Oh, but it's related to Superman or no?
Well, no. I mean, I'd love to know if you were sort of in the room and you could interview the two guys. What would you want to talk to them about? I mean, you've got such a strong connection to them through the studying that you've done and that research. As you said, it's impossible to know if it is all true, but the fact you've got so many references in the back of your book of where you did your research and who you spoke with and what you read, there's so much in there that has to be accurate. But if you could just have a conversation with them both. Oh, no, we got something. What have you got?
No, I think you just I think there's one thing in the book that I think I supported with like a ton of facts. But in the end, they're all facts like around it. Jerry never comes out and says it ever. But I have like just a mountain of facts that made me okay to say it. And that was, and I've gotten like some people have said like I totally agree with this, and some people say, "Oh, you're crazy." Is that it was the death of his father that really, that was Superman. And
Mm.
I think I've, if this was like a 10th grade term paper, I'm like really confident in my evidence. I have like evidence from the text, right?
Yeah.
Um, but he never comes out and says it.
No.
He says it in his stories, he says it through other characters, says it through Superman. But I think I would ask him, was that it, or was that just a coincidence? Because it could be, it could have been a coincidence. But I think I would ask him that, just because I'm that always that surprised me. And other people, started that before me. They noticed that. Um, but I kind of got into it a little more, but I would like to know that just for my own.
And that's, I mean, it's something that's happened in the Superman stories throughout the ages, is the fact that
Yeah,
Superman's father, sometimes fathers, pass away, and it's a big cornerstone in his life. My own father passed away when I was 15, and I used that.
sorry to hear it.
Thank you, sir. But I use that part of the story as my connection to Superman, to see
Yeah,
how
yeah.
he dealt with it, to see how different versions of Superman over the years got through that. Because
Yes.
everybody goes through their own grief a different way, whether that be reading comics or doing whatever. But
Yeah.
that, as questions go, it would have been a very good question to ask. So well done on taking so much
It was
time
a
and
tough
effort into
one.
it.
That was
I'm
good.
glad. I'm glad. I wanted to get into this wonderful mind of yours, and I feel I have a little bit. Now, as I said before we recorded this podcast, when this episode is live, there will be a giveaway going for a copy of this wonderful book, a worldwide giveaway, because I want
Ooh.
as many people around the world to read this book. And if I can help just one person learn a little bit more about Superman and Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, thanks to you, I want to make that happen. Thank you for your time today, sir. I've got my last question to ask you, but before I do that, where can people find you online, Brad?
Um, I kind of left the awful place.
The place,
Uh
the bad
I'm
place,
on
they call
what's
it.
that?
The bad place, the other place.
The bad place, the other place. That sounds like Batman's place. No, I left that place. I just couldn't. I miss it, but I just couldn't do it.
Mm,
And no judgment if anybody's still on there. Because I'm a little jealous. It was a fun place
mm.
in its time. So now I'm on Facebook, you can just type my name in, Instagram, same thing, and I'm on Threads, which I like so far. I think it's just Brad Dash Ricca. Um, and I've been putting some Superman stuff
You have.
on
I've,
there
I've, I've
because with
noticed. I've noticed. I mean, as you said, Threads it's a new thing. So it's a new
yeah.
baby, as it were. But it's starting to take shape. So I will leave a link to your Threads in the bio as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been good for comics so far. There's less like screaming. Um and yeah, I feel like Superman is going, it's going to be the new movie is going to drive that. But I think there's something different than like the other new movies that there were, and no disrespect to them because I like Superman, so I like any of it. Um but I feel like there's a real shift happening that we've had like since the mid 80s, we've been like in a Batman era.
Hmm.
And I feel like it's partially what's going on in the world, what's going on in us, that we kind of like to act out what's happening by liking Batman. And there's nothing wrong with liking Batman. I like Batman just fine. Um, but I feel like we're making that, and I feel like we're making the shift now. I think towards a Superman, which I is good for good for you and me, Superman people, but it's good for the world, right? Have a little light instead of the darkness. So we'll see. I could be wrong, but
It's not the first time I'm hearing this outlook though, and I
oh,
love it
good.
because I feel the same way. As you said, there's a bit of a, we can see more, a little bit more hope, perhaps a little bit
Hmm.
more. joy in the character. And
Yes.
if we get a glimpse of that, I mean, James Gunn's been very clever with what he's revealed so far. There's not been any sort of look or any costume reveal, but he's revealed a cast and they all seem to have so much love for this film. Of course, they're promoting a movie, they're going to be
Right. Right.
positive about it, but their love for that part of the film and what James Gunn is doing, it's making me feel very hopeful and
Yeah.
excited. That's what I like. And the fact that more Superman fans are coming out of the woodwork. We're
Hmm.
getting the original fans coming back and talking about things what they love about Superman, but we're also getting this excitement and this joy for the unknown that we will be getting pretty soon. And with James Gunn's love for storytelling and world development, and the fact now that he is working in DC for the future, I'm very excited. It's a fun time for sure.
Yeah, for definitely, I agree with all that, and even the the comics too have kind of um made, I think, kind of a turn, um and where they're kind of embracing that kind of Superman. The one Mark Wade's doing,
Mm-hmm.
the World's Finest, is, I think, the best Superman comic I've read in 10 years.
Wow,
Phil Kennedy Johnson's Action Comics was
phenomenal. Yeah,
um tremendous
yeah.
Superman stuff. He was in Cleveland a few months ago, and he went to the house. And I saw him the night before, but I wasn't with him when he went to I don't know if this is like public knowledge, but he went to the house and went up to the room and said, "I'd like to be alone."
Oh,
So he gets it too,
he gets it. I
right?
mean, that's my one
He's one of us.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a bucket list moment for me to be not only outside that house and to see it because I know people from around the world have it's
Oh
there
yeah.
and there's a plaque outside, it's
Yep.
getting recognition, but to be able to just can I have just a moment alone in this room just to literally feel the history in that room, feel the magic happening. The goose pimples are back. I'm getting a little bit tingly, but
And that's who wants to go.
mm,
Is our writers. I mean, Mark Wade was at the house years ago. Brad Meltzer famously,
mhm,
visited the house, and then he was the one who said, "We've got to restore it."
yeah.
And he raised uh, all this money through an auction with his friends and now it's all restored. And there's this cool fence and one more thing I can say too, if anyone like you is thinking of visiting our fair city, um, we've just gotten the kind of go ahead to do their long awaited, like decades
Mm.
in the making, statue of Superman in
Which
Cleveland. And this is not going to be, this is, it's really cool. And you can't, they're not like letting people show the pictures of it. And some people have, but it's, if you like Superman, and which I love, that part's great, but there's also something for Jerry, Joe, and Joanne, who was the physical model for and kind of emotional model for Lois Lane.
mm.
So it's going to be awesome, and that's uh, next year would be a good time to visit Cleveland. I'm just saying.
That's the thing. I'm looking at more travel in my future, and I'm
I know
anytime
it's a long slog. I've
it's
been
a
to where
lot.
you are.
No,
Yeah,
it's but I know I'll tell you I know that I am going to be there one day. I it's one of those things where I've over the years had such a strong connection with the character, and then
yeah, yeah.
again, thanks to this book, it's more information about this state, about its history. I love walking and I love going out and about. And when I
Mm,
need a good song to listen to, I've got a playlist on my phone for the
mm.
Ohio State Marching Band because I absolutely adore not only their showmanship, what they can do on the pitch and off
Yes.
the pitch, but I love the music. I love their passion for putting on a great show. And over the years, I've known some people that have traveled and those that live in Ohio and
Yeah.
Cleveland. And I'm often getting photographs of the airport because you've got a little Superman shrine there when you
Yep.
come in. So I've definitely got a bit of a kindred spirit with the state, with the people, with the history. So if you feel that next year is a good year for me to attend, then next year is a good year for me to attend. And I'm often on Google Earth walking up and down that street. So
Wow.
waiting to see if any houses become available next door to it because
Yeah.
I want to be Superman's neighbor. That's what I want to be.
Well, that's not a bad place. There's good real estate value
Mm,
in Cleveland these days, all over. Yeah, the one of the funny things we did when we restored the house is we got like kind of like unofficial street signs, and we renamed. They're all still there. There's one on the street where Jerry lived, and it's called Jerry Siegel Street. And Joe, of course, lived just a couple blocks down.
mhm.
That's why they were best friends. Well, it's not why they were best friends, but it doesn't hurt, right?
Doesn't hurt.
And we named his Joe Shuster Street, and the street that connects them is, of course, Lois Lane.
Slade.
So there's a lot of cool stuff. Those of you are out there, and now this sounds like a tourism advertisement for Cleveland.
If
Everybody will
so,
come and be like,
that's fine.
"Really?"
This
But it's
episode,
great. You
this
should come if you
episode,
like Superman.
yeah, this episode of the podcast of Steel, sponsored by Ohio, the whole state. That'd be fantastic. I'm fine with that.
But we'll
I'm
have some stuff next year going on. So some stuff. So yeah, anybody Superman fans, please, keep your ears open.
I'm looking forward to that, and I will be getting in touch with the Fine Tourism Board of Ohio. So hopefully, I can share as much news of that as possible. Brad, thank you, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an absolute pleasure. I knew you were going to be a fantastic guest, and this interview has finally happened. Hopefully, the first of many. That's what I'd like to say. But Brad, as I said, thank you not only for this book, but for your time today. As ambassadors for Superman go, you are up there. You've done some fantastic work on helping to keep the history of Superman out there and for people to read. And as I said, there will be links to this book below. There will be a link to the giveaway. My final question for you today, a question that I love to ask people all around the world in my day-to-day life and interviews, is what does Superman mean to you?
Oof. I mean, it's the basic stuff, you know. You be good to people, you help people, um, even when it's difficult to. I mean, that's kind of the surface stuff, but it's really, it's a couple things. I mean, this is not just one answer. It's Clark Kent too, because Clark has to so often restrain himself,
Mhm.
kind of, and that there's so much power in his Clarkness, right? His people say, "Oh, he's meek and he's boring," and no, he's just Clark, right? He's just a guy, and he's just trying his best, and he gets to do this thing where nobody knows it's him. I mean, now like everybody knows it's him, but really nobody knows it's him. So there's no glory in it, right? You don't do it for the money, you don't do it for you just do it to do it. And that's not Superman, that's Clark, to me. And I never I have to give credit where credit is due. I first like learned that version of Superman from Brad Meltzer. The first time I met him, the first thing he literally said was Superman is Clark Kent. And it just kind of, I'm like, oh, you're right. I mean, Superman doesn't exist. It's just Clark. And I know everybody debates that, and I love debating it, but I think it's Clark. But to me, then there's like kind of my personal version, because that one's I kind of ripped that off him. But mine is what Superman means to me is that you can be a kid in Cleveland, Ohio, and you can have, you know, really no prospects. You're never going to college. You're not, um, you don't have a lot, but you can have an imagination, right? And with that imagination, you can do whatever you want. That to me is Superman. It's not, and that was my goal with this book, was to expand Superman. So there's Superman, an infant crashes from the planet Krypton, and that, you know, this, I mean, that's the Superman I love, but that the story begins before, that it's an idea. Um, and it's such a good idea,
Mm.
right? That you can have a good idea and it can change the world. I mean, it's simple, it's maybe it's nerdy and easy, but what the heck? I like it. So yeah.
Perfect. As again, it's a question that I love asking people. No answer is ever the same, but I love every single one. I think maybe one day in decades to come, I will sort of create a book of my own where everybody puts their answers in because
Ooh, that's a good idea.
and I mean,
Ooh, that's a good idea.
yours has that's yours will definitely be in there, sir. But thank you so much for your time today, Brad. It has been an absolute pleasure. All the links to you and where you can find this book will be in the bio. Um, just I've said it so many times in this video and podcast because I feel like I just have to. Thank you for this book. Thank you for this insight into Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster for giving me a stronger connection to the hero that means so much to me because I know that without this book, I wouldn't be the Superman fan that I am today. So thank you one more time, sir.
You have no idea how much that means to me, Luke, because it really, um, you know, that's really what I had this like faint, like maybe I could do that, you know, and to hear that just means the world to me, and I really mean that. The only reason I keep chuckling when you thank me is because I forget. I haven't been to the UK in a long time, but I forget how similar. The Midwest, the American Midwesterner is like the um, the kind of British. Lots of thanks, and I love it because people make fun of the Midwest because we thank people a lot. We do two things a lot. We say thank you a lot, and we say I'm sorry a lot.
We do that a lot
And I yeah, and I
here.
forgot when because I spent a lot of time over there and how much it made me feel at home when I was there by myself. You know, people, thank you. So that's the only reason I'm chuckling because it really does mean the world to me. So thank you so much.
I don't think this will be the last time that we're going to talk about this book or about Superman or things in general. It's been a wonderful chat today, and I shall do my very best. But I shall hope to see you next year when I come across the pond because I feel that this trip is one that I need to make happen. Sir.
Okay, great. I can't wait.
All right. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Luke. You're the best.